kayok. I had not realized that it's been 3 weeks since I posted the last video. And in that video, I wanted you to resubmit your submissions for the contest to win one of the 10 Commandments book. And that was only for question number 1 because one of you got it right. Well, I still have not received the correct answer again, so I'm still waiting. I also wanted to let you know the status, the progress of the first printing of our book. And I'm still waiting because I had to deal with an issue concerning the cover art. And I'll be sending that back in Wednesday. But it's coming. Now, the next video I'm going to post, I'll be letting you know that the book is on the way. And when I receive it, I'll be uploading that video so you can see the book. Okay, so there are going to be 2 videos posted after this one. One will be announcing they've shipped the first printing to me. It's on the way. I'll let you know the expected arrival day, and then the video after that, I will let you see the book, and then we're going to get yours shipped to you. So I just want to say thank you all for participating in the pre-order period, and thank you for supporting this work. Now, a warning. I'm sure you noted the title of this video because we're not going to be discussing the arrival of the first printing of our book. We're going to be discussing something else, and it has everything to do with you having a fighting chance to survive what's taking place on this earth at this period in time. In the past, I have said to a lot of you in conversation that the descendants of Kemet are in a lot of trouble and that many of them will be killed off. I don't know how many will be left over. I have no idea. And some of you wanted to know how I know this, and I said, well, it's in our prophecies in the so-called Bible. They will be killed. Not just them, because the ones who are being used to kill them off, they have a target on them as well. And that is what we're going to be discussing as well in the 10 Commandments book. So what I wanted to do is to let you listen to a man who I mentioned before in some of my other videos when I shared with you the information about what happened to me when I was a child. When an entity, a thing, I don't know what it was, when it came to my home, and it took me from my home. And the only reason it took me back was because it told me, he said, that he had been instructed to return me to my home or their plans would not be realized. I also mentioned that there was a tribal chieftain over in Africa who you more than likely know as Credo Mutwa. And I think he's one of the chiefs of the Zulu tribe. And he said that he too had been abducted. So what I want you to do is to listen to an interview in part. I will put a link to the full interview below. Now there's another interview that I want you all to listen to, but I will warn you that if listening to information about hauntings or evil spirits, if it spooks you, you do not want to listen to it because it is a true story. But the reason I want you to listen to it is because the victims who were involved in the so-called haunting came face to face with a very ancient evil spirit. Now, I know in the religion of Islam, I think someone said they refer to them as Iblis. But they say that these very ancient spirits are the ones who refuse to bow or serve the one you know as Adam. That name Adam is referring to Ada and his wife Amma. And of course, when you read the Apocrypha, you do see that some of the so-called angels, which is really inappropriate to call them that, but some of the so-called angels did lose their positions because they did refuse to serve Ada wa Amma, aka Adam. But according to what I've heard, they say that who those spirits are. What I will tell you is that you don't have to be afraid of them. Not unless if you're living a life of amorality, amor, not moral. Someone asked me about the name Amorites and if those are the Moors. No, those are the Eti Roma. That's who they are. And I might post a separate video. But if you're living a life of immorality, then you have every reason to be afraid of them. And that's because we're living in an age, a conclusion of a cycle. And in the Ten Commandments book, we do discuss the ending of this age or this cycle. I also explained to you the true meaning of the word cycle as we Hebrews or Shemites understand it, because it does not mean what you think it means. But we do go into that into detail. So it's pertinent that you understand what the word cycle really means, okay? So that's why I included that in one of the chapters in the Ten Commandments book. Now, there is something I want to warn you about. As I was saying about being moral and making sure you're living by these laws, you have to keep in mind that when groups or tribes or races of individuals, peoples or humans begin to behave a certain way that's very destructive, not only to themselves, when they become a harm and danger to others, and then they also are harming the planet, the earth, that's when the Creator sends destroyers, and they will literally excise them out of existence. Now, that's what's happening to those over in so-called Africa as well. Now, I did have some discussions with the descendants of Kemet a few years ago, and I warned them they were in trouble and that they were setting themselves up for destruction by making an alliance with GOG and Magog. Now, according to the prophecy, these ones of GOG and Magog, these ones consist of the descendants of the fallen angels, as they were known in English. And there's a mixture of those who come from Ada who are also mixed with them, meaning that they mingle themselves with Canaanites. That's who comprise that gaggle of folks known as GOG and Magog in the Bible. One of the reasons I want you to listen to this information that is shared by Credo Mutwa. Now, I know David Icke, he pronounced his Credo's name as Credo, so I have no idea exactly how to pronounce his first name. I say Credo, it may be Credo. But the reason I want you to listen to what he's saying is because you know my methodology. Just as I brought you the video about our language, and I showed you the proof from the horse's own mouth that so-called modern Hebrew is in fact not Hebrew, it's not a part of the Shemitic language family, I went to the source themselves. Those who say they are us and are not. That's in the book of Revelation, right? The Apocalypse. I go to the source written by their own humans from their own race who put in their own writings, and they tell you themselves that Yiddish is not Shemitic, it's not Hebrew. They tell you to look at the Germanic language family instead. The Germans are of Gomer. And when you're reading these writings about how they got themselves involved with the fallen in exchange for power, and so they have this so-called angelic technology that they're using, all these weapons of mass destruction. They've also built nuclear power plants over on Kemet land and some other things as well. The Russians were in charge of that. And so I warned the descendants of Kemet years ago, you're in trouble. They're going to wipe you out. And so instead of you hearing it from me, I'm going to let you hear it from one of the great-grandsons of Kemet. His name is Credo Mutwa. He's going to tell you some very interesting information about tribes that are gone, that have been exterminated. And he will tell you from his own mouth that that land over there that they called Africa, I'll just call it Kemet land, is dying. He will tell you from his own mouth. They are exterminating his people. And when you find out who they are, you probably won't believe it. But they are the same ones who came to my home when I was a child, and they took me from it. Well, it was only one of them. But he was working with a group. Because like I said, his words to me were, I have been instructed to return you to your home, or our plans will not be realized. All of my life, I've been trying to figure out what was it about me that they found so interesting that they felt the need to send one of their workers into my home, a home that was built of brick All the doors and windows were locked, but somehow he got in. And when we left, he walked me hand in hand through a brick wall of my home. We walked right through it. And I am not the first one this has happened to, the Credo Mutwa, because even worse things have happened to him and to a lot of those of his own people. But the prophecies in our Hebrew writings about what would happen to those who were transgressing law is happening now. The reason you did not know about this is because those also control the media, and so they control the information you get or not. And that's why you have not heard about this, because not only have they been exterminating those people over there, but they are in the process of exterminating them. They also told us of so-called Israel, we don't call ourselves Israel, that they would send us a helper so that we can survive this. I'll show you right here what the word helper means. You see it right there? Abi, helper. Abi, that's the prefix of the word Bible. If you can't read it, you're in trouble. But it also tells us, those of us who are of so-called Israel, it tells us how to protect ourselves so that we will come to no harm. That is what the story of Daniel in the so-called lion's den is about. The lion's den. All these prophecies that we were warned about, it's all taking place. Most people are taking no note. They're not paying attention at all. They have no idea what's happening around them. I don't see how they are not noticing that Satanism is spreading like a wildfire around them. They're trying to psych you out and convince you to let them have sex with your little children. Have you guys heard about the drag queen hour they have at certain libraries? And how horrific the drags look sitting up there reading to those children? They make it look like a beauty queen. Anyway, I'm sharing this information with you because, like I said, I want you to have a fighting chance. I will tell you, as I've mentioned this, not strongly, but I really want to kind of shout it out from the rooftops. You need to prepare to get yourselves out of the Canaanite cities. And when I say Canaanite cities, it says in the writings that Cain was the builder of the first city. So the Canaanites are builders of cities. And they have this psychoses where they like to stack and pack. It's very claustrophobic. You know, and they take humans and they pack them into these claustrophobic cities of theirs. Very unnatural, very unhealthy. They've always done that. They tried it in ancient Babylon. Remember when they tried to build that tower? But they like to pack people in these cities and take all of your freedoms away. And like I was saying, they tried it in ancient Babylon. So the creators to put a stop to it. And then the people, according to their tongues they were given, they were dispersed. So I want to say again, you need to make preparation. Don't just run out there into the wild. You won't survive. Okay? And that's because you've been physically and mentally handicapped by these Canaanite systems. You don't know how to search for natural food. You don't even know how to hunt. You don't even realize that they're entities or life forms, a different species that is out there. And they've been here. Now, when you listen to Credo Mutwa in full, he's going to tell you that he was told that if he did not stop talking about what he was talking about, his wife would die. And he said she did. I'm not going to go into detail of what I've been through the past few years since I started releasing this information. But because of the bloodline I come from, I know this is who I am. This fight has been going on for a long time, thousands of years. And my childhood has prepared me for this. So For those of you who are considering getting into this battle, think. Pick your battles wisely. If you have young children, don't do it. If you're single, stay that way if you want to get involved in this fight. Trust me. So, I'm not going to say I hope you enjoy what you're going to hear. You won't enjoy it. But it's going to teach you a lot. It's going to open your eyes and your mind to information you probably were not privy to. That's all right. If someone doesn't tell you, then how are you going to know? Okay? I will tell you this. The information about our so-called diet in the Bible is there for us for a reason. It protects you. Because these things, I will tell you, they do eat humans. And they eat people too. Humans and people are not the same category. They eat humans and they eat people. I am going to post a video, which may come before the next two videos, where I will share a bit of information. It's not to scare you, it's just to make you aware of what's out there. Okay? Because I've noticed some of you Hamites actually have convinced yourselves that you're going to come over here to the Americas, you're going to pretend to be us, you're not even Hebrews, and you're just going to go out onto our lands. No. The only thing I'm going to say to you is this. The aliens dwell in the cleft of the rocks, and they eat humans. If you don't know what I mean, you would be a fool to take yourselves out onto our ancestral lands. And that's all I'm going to say. So I'm going to play these clips now. The first one you're going to listen to is the interview of Credo Mutwa. It is not the full interview. I will put the link below, and you can click on it and listen to it in its entirety. The second one is the interview of the victim who had to deal with a very ancient entity. Some of them refer to them as the Iblis, and others call them the genies. It is not the full interview. I will put the link below, and you can click on it and listen to it in its entirety. I have seen a genie before. That is the event, the second event that prompted my exodus from the Jehovah's Witness religion, when I encountered a genie or an Iblis. Let me tell you how they look. They look like smoke. Grainy, sandy, dark smoke. They can move very fast. And if you track them with your eyes as they move about, they look like smoke. That's how they look. Now this one was a fresh one because he liked to touch me. I wasn't afraid of him on that level because he would actually open my refrigerator door for me sometimes. It was the weirdest thing. But that event is one of the things that prompted my exodus from the Jehovah's Witnesses religion, because I'd come across some information in one of the stories in the Apocrypha. And the other event that caused me to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses religion was when I died. And I'll do a separate video about that. That will be a story time. I might just go ahead and post that one after this. And then in that video, we'll talk more about the genie. Because I don't want you to be afraid of genies. Like I said, some say that they are the ones who refuse to bow or serve Adawa'ama. So they are very ancient spirits. I suggest that you do not communicate with them. They engage in double and triple speak. They say things that make you think one thing, but they mean something completely different. And if you're not familiar with not only Hebrew, with other languages as well, they will trick you. So you got to be very careful, okay? So I guess I'll just post that video right after this one. We'll talk about the genies, the Iblis, my experience with one of them, and how I realized that the JW religion is being used for something nefarious. So I'll post that video right after this, all right? But now we're going to listen to these brief clips. If you want to hear them in full, please look below the video in the description box and click on those links, all right? Talk to you soon.
First of all, can I make a correction here? We African people, at least here in Southern Africa, we the initiates of Antu, we do not believe that the creatures which rule us and which abduct us are extraterrestrials. We believe that they are children of the serpent, that they made God angry by practicing very bad magic. And some of them tried to fight against God, and God threw them away from this earth, and they ran away to certain stars, is in the same constellation that white people call the Draco. Some of these beings ran away and found homes in the Muhambi constellation, the constellation of the walking giant, which the white people, they call it Orion. They ran away from our earth because they had done rubbish to God's creation, and God kicked them out. And when God had created us, these rascals came back and they started messing about with us. And we started longing to go up there, and we ignored the earth. We destroyed the earth in trying to get up there. In other words, these elder brothers, the jealous ones, the whisperers of the dark law, they turned us against God by taking away our spiritual powers from us in order to make us to consume the earth and so to destroy. This is what causes my heart to bleed, because Africa is dying. Our people are being destroyed. And whether we believe this or not, a system of genocide, cold-blooded and deliberate and utterly unhuman, is being practiced in Africa everywhere. And what startles me and shakes my spirit is this. I used to travel through Africa before the Second World War, when I was quite young, and I traveled through Africa during the Second World War. Now, many of the tribes which I learned great knowledge from have been wiped out. They no longer exist anymore. They are gone, finished. And this pattern is happening all over Africa, in the Sudan, in Uganda, in Kenya. There are tribes, and Angola. There are tribes which are no longer there anymore. They have been deliberately wiped out. And I ask myself, is there no one who pities Africa? Is there no one who sees what is being done to my people? Our leaders, our politicians seem to be criminally blind to what is going on in Africa. In Africa, sir, if you draw a map of Africa before you, you will find that all those countries where long civil wars are being waged are those countries which, if they were left to themselves, would feed Africa. The Sudan, Angola, Mozambique, these countries were once some of the biggest food producers in Africa. They fed the Portuguese Empire and the British Empire. Uganda was once the breadbasket of Africa. But whole populations have been wiped out. And if anyone thinks that I, a shaman of my people, can stand by and watch this crime, then they are mistaken.
Deborah Moffat is just a regular person, an experiencer behind the acclaimed books A Deadly Haunting and Unwelcomed, which draw upon the frightening experiences she and her family endured at the hands of their unseen tormentor. Vastly intelligent and destructive, this demon wrought havoc in their lives and home, resulting in a daily battle to maintain their own sanity. After 25 years, Deborah decided to tell her story, detailing what went on in her family's home during the 6-year nightmare in which this entity plagued them. For these 6 years, the Moffat family was terrorized by a demon from the past. A demon that claimed that Lee Moffat was promised to him as a sacrifice hundreds of years ago. The entity had come to collect. There were no safe havens. There was nowhere to run. The Moffat family had only one option, as we would all have. Now, to Deborah Moffat, and you're just not going to believe what you're about to hear. Deborah, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you for having me on.
Do you prefer Deborah or Debbie or Ms.
Debbie's fine.
Or Miss Moffat?
No, Debbie's fine.
Debbie it is. If you would, please, tell us just a little bit about yourself.
I have 3 children, still live in the same house where the last part of this story occurred, retired, and Mr. Entity has been gone 25 years now, and we've never heard another thing from him.
So this all occurred that long ago, Debbie, is that right?
Yes, it did. It happened. It actually started before I was even in the scene. It happened. I married my husband in 1987.
Right.
And this actually started from what we can. The researchers that came to study it think it started back in 1984. 1984. And it had to do with a Guatemalan housekeeper who practiced Santeria.
Ah, yes. Okay, so who got her upset?
Well, back in 1984, my husband's mother, her mother, his grandmother, had a stroke, and they hired a Guatemalan housekeeper to take care of her.
Right.
And she lived right next door to my mother-in-law and my husband.
Right.
And the Guatemalan housekeeper, very nice lady, I don't think, from what I've been told, did any of this on purpose. She was afraid that when she lost her job, when the grandmother died, she'd have to go back to Guatemala.
I see.
So I think she was trying to keep the grandmother alive as long as she could. And what happened is she opened some type of a door and allowed something to come in. After her mother died and Juanita left the house, they went to clean it, and they found strange markings all through the house. They found candle wax, broken rosary beads, and blood and feathers. From what they told the researchers that came to the new house, they believe that that's probably what happened. That's because they can think of no other way, why this started.
Okay, but you said feathers and blood and what else?
Broken rosary beads, feathers, candle wax, and strange symbols all through the house.
Okay, so there was practice going on in the house, no question about that.
Right.
I do certainly agree, Debbie, that when you dabble in such things, you do leave open the door for something you don't want.
Like I said, I don't believe she did this, anything to happen on purpose. She was just trying to keep the grandmother alive to save her job. Okay. But it didn't matter. Something evil did come through. Well, this is a story that now the entity used to communicate with us by writing on a mirror with soap.
Really?
And it would write from morning, noon, and night. And it told me the story of, because one of the times I asked it, why are you doing this? Why are you here? And it told me why it wanted Lee.
Okay.
That he was in, not now, I don't mean in physical form, but he was in a monastery way back in the 1600s. And some of the monks there practiced Satanism, but he believed because she was promised to him, Lee, in a past life, now she still belonged to him. And now he found her and he came to collect her.
Okay, I want to be straight about this. Lee, or Lee to be, was promised in a past life to this demon.
Right.
So it wasn't Lee per se, it was, I guess it was Lee. How could they know to promise Lee would be there that far ahead of time?
I don't know. They promised her in that lifetime with the monks. So he still believes she belonged. This is what the demon wrote to me. So he still believed that she belonged to him, and he came to collect her.
Wow. All right. So that Lee, the mother-in-law, was promised to this demon in a previous life. In other words, some kind of, almost like a curse, I guess?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense. But one would imagine there was a deal cut. In other words, don't take me, take somebody from my lineage somewhere down the line.
I don't know.
I don't know is a good answer.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You know what? There are so many things about this to this day that I still don't know.
All right. That said, all right. So I would assume then that long ago, your children were about what age when this began?
When this began, my one son had just been born in 1987.
Right.
And then the other two were born in 1990. They're twins.
Oh.
So until this came out in 2014, they knew nothing about it. We had never spoke about it in the house.
This is so well documented, all of this. I know that, for example, somebody I trust implicitly was there with you, Dr. Evelyn Paglini, who helped you out, I guess, substantially. You can confirm that, right?
Dr. Evelyn Paglini was awesome. She was a wonderful lady.
Okay.
I mean, when she came to the house, she came in with such courage and such confidence.
That was Evelyn.
When I look at her, I thought, we're saved. This lady's going to save us.
If anybody could, she'd be the one. The Warrens, were the Warrens also involved somehow?
Ed and Lorraine Warren came.
Really?
Yes.
But I guess Evelyn Paglini helped out a bit more?
She couldn't get rid of it.
Couldn't get rid of
tried.
it? Wow.
No.
Wow.
And the entity hated Dr. Paglini.
I can imagine.
He absolutely hated Dr. Paglini. He every minute was writing nasty things about her, vulgar things about her on the mirror. But she told us, I can't get rid of this. She said, it's too powerful. It's ancient, it's old, and I can't get rid of it.
Let me tell you, for Dr. Paglini, that's one hell of a statement.
Yeah, I know it, because I thought she'd be the one. But she said she was actually worried for my mother-in-law's life.
Oh, yes.
She said, I can suggest something to do. Whether you do it or not, it's up to you. She said, this deity, she called it an ancient deity, or she never really called it a demon, and she called it more of a deity. So,
oh, good Lord. Let us now go back to the very first thing, and you're still in the same house, right?
Well, see, it started at a different house.
Oh, it began. All right. So at this different house, located where? In what?
Where it very first started, it's in Rancho Cucamonga on Archibald and Narrow Highway, excuse me.
I always thought there was something wrong with Rancho Cucamonga. I could never pin it down.
And there were like three houses right on the corner, right there. And my mother-in-law and father-in-law owned the one in the middle. Her mother owned the one next to it, and my husband owned the one on the other side.
All right. Well,
the three houses were all connected.
Let's deal with the house you were in. Was it limited to that house, by the way?
No. And when all three houses were affected.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Start with the first thing that ever happened.
No, I can start with the first thing that happened that I can confirm because I actually saw it.
Fair enough.
Things that happened earlier, I never saw, so it's only hearsay.
Fair enough.
What I actually witnessed, the first thing was a ports. We had a tenant that moved into. My husband rented his house out, and we lived with his mother and father.
Right.
He had a heart condition, and he just felt closer, felt safer living together. So we all lived together.
Right.
We rented out his house to a gentleman. He had a large sports collection, my husband. So he left one room in the house locked. And the gentleman had free run of the house, but he couldn't touch this room.
Got it.
We would go down periodically to check on the room. The very first thing that happened is we unlocked the door where his sports memorabilia were, and something had taken all the baseball bobbleheads off the wall and put them into the shape of a triangle on the floor.
Oh my. All right.
And, of course...
And this is locked all the time. Is that right?
This was locked. We were the only ones with the key. We automatically thought the tenant did it.
Well, that's just as bad. I mean, then you think you have somebody you can't trust.
Right, but at least you can see that person, and you can deal with them.
True.
We confronted him. He said, I've never been in that room. I never touch it.
I have a room like that in my house. There's nothing but very expensive, very complicated radios inside, and so nobody goes in there.
Right. That's the way Bill felt about his sports collection.
I fully understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so here are bobbleheads on the floor in a triangle.
Right. We locked it back up. Like I said, talked to the tenant. Well, he assured us he didn't touch it. Well, what could we say? We thought he did, but we said, well, don't do it again.
Right.
Within a week's time, my mother-in-law was very religious.
Yes.
Next to her bed, she had a stand with all types of religious statues on it. One morning, she wakes up, and on the statue of Jesus is a pair of men's briefs.
Bad.
Out of nowhere. Of course, she thought one of us was playing a joke. You know, what are you doing? None of us could figure out how it got there. At that time, none of us even understood what an apport was.
Well, look, even I don't know what it is. What is it?
It's something that moves, something like an object that moves without anyone physically moving it.
Right. Okay. Well, here's what I think. There's almost nobody, regardless of their religion, who would do something like that. I mean, it's just so highly disrespectful. I can't imagine, of course, I don't know your family, but I can't imagine anybody would hang some underwear on a cross. No way.
No, she was very upset, and it progressed from there. We just didn't know what was going on. Went back down to the house like a couple weeks later, and he wasn't home. And we noticed over all the light fixtures where you click the lights on and off.
Yes.
Someone had made strange symbols, and it looked like they were drawn in crayon.
Well, now you did have children in the house, of course.
No. My children, my one son was only like a month old.
Oh, okay.
That was it.
I don't imagine him slithering out of his... No. Okay.
And this gentleman was all alone.
Gotcha.
So then within a few weeks, the gentleman said, I'm leaving.
Don't blame him.
Didn't give us a reason why. He just said, I'm going. And he told us that on Friday, and by Sunday he was gone. He wouldn't talk about anything. He just left. So he was gone.
Okay.
We went when he left up to the house to look at it to see what needed to be cleaned to re-rent it.
Right.
My husband goes in his room. I stood in the living room looking around, seeing what needed to be cleaned. There was a long shelf on the top of the wall, ran the whole length of the living room with all kinds of knickknacks.
Right.
I looked at it, and then I looked back, and I looked again at it within like a blink of an eye. Every single thing on that shelf was turned backwards within a blink of an eye.
Oh, bad.
My husband came out. I said, you're not going to believe this. And he didn't. He said, no, you didn't see it right to begin with. They were all turned backwards. Maybe this man had problems. He did these weird things. So just let it go. So I knew, though, what I saw.
Right. That's right. I understand. You know what you see, and what you see is what you saw.
Right.
Simple as that.
He made plans to come back at the next day to start cleaning. He kept the place pretty good, but it needed to be cleaned. We came in. We walked in the door. In the middle of the living room was a lamp from the bedroom sitting in the middle of the floor.
Ay.
And I just looked, and my husband said, "Oh, somebody must have came in the house," because he wouldn't want to believe. He was so afraid of the paranormal, he wouldn't want to believe something paranormal was happening. So we put that lamp back. We went into the kitchen. We went in the kitchen probably for 2 minutes. Came back into the living room, and the furniture from the dining room was stacked up in the living room.
Good Lord.
Within 2 minutes, and we didn't hear a thing.
Okay, I wonder what you were thinking, and I wonder what your husband was thinking.
Two completely opposite things. I looked at it as something, at the time, I wasn't familiar with anything paranormal. I had never been frightened in my life by it.
Right.
I looked at this as something absolutely fascinating. Look what was happening. You know, it was like my mind was going in circles trying to figure out what was going on. My husband's first instinct was, let's get out of here. Let's go. Let's hurry. Let's get out. And it was fascinating to me. I put the furniture back. He left. He stood outside the door. He didn't want to be in the house.
Don't blame him a bit. I've got to give you props for a steel spine that I don't have. I'd have been so out of there like your husband. Boy. So this went on how long?
Now, this went on probably for another week, and then everything just stopped. We went back to the house. Nothing was moving. Everything just went right back to normal.
Okay.
So the next month we decided, everything's back to normal now. Maybe this gentleman, left something, he dabbled or did something, left something around, and everything's gone now, so we're okay. So we decided to re-rent it out.
Right.
So we rented out the house again where the tenant was with the bobblehead. So we rented that out again because everything was quiet.
Sure.
And like I said, there was nothing threatening that happened. So I didn't feel frightened in any way. My mother-in-law and my husband, on the other hand, they were still frightened of this.
Mm. Did you disclose to this new...
Yes.
You
yes.
did?
My husband said, this house may be haunted. And they laughed.
Yeah.
So they moved in. It was a younger woman and an older gentleman. They weren't married, but they lived together. The lady was very kind. We lived next door. I would talk periodically with her when I went out in the yard. She was a nice lady. Then I noticed that I didn't see her very much.
Oh.
And then I see her in the front yard, and she looks like someone had beaten her up. And I confronted her. I said, "Are you okay? What happened?" And she told me, ever since they moved into the house, that her boyfriend had become hostile. She said she didn't know what had happened to him.
Right, okay. All right, continue.
So we left both houses empty. We found a new place to live. It was like 10 miles up the hill from where we lived.
All right.
And so we were moving very slowly. They put the property on the market, and we were moving our possessions very slowly up into the new house. The very last day we were there at the house, my mother-in-law and I were alone. And for us, this is when it really became hostile towards us. Everyone was gone. My mother-in-law and I were in the back bedroom. We were getting the last of her things, and there was one box. And all of a sudden from the kitchen, we hear almost like an explosion. We run to the kitchen, and the entity or whatever, what happened, all the cupboards had been just ripped off the walls.
The walls?
Off the walls. There were pieces of them were lying all over the cupboard, all over the floor in the kitchen.
Oh, Debbie.
Yeah, then we hear glass breaking. We go back into the bedroom to see what happened, and it blew out all the windows in the back bedroom. And I remember grabbing my mother-in-law by the arm, and we just ran out of the house and got in the car.
And did what? I mean, in the car, sure, for a while, shaking,
we
probably.
Just sat there. My mother-in-law, she was so frightened.
That I get.
We went back home when we were up at the new house, and thank God for a small time, everything was quiet. Nothing happened. It was like we found our safe haven. We were okay. At least that's what we thought. But it didn't turn out that way. We were here for like 3 weeks, and then a thing that anybody else would experience, they would just ignore it, happened. A picture was turned backwards, and it was like a bell went off in my head. It was like,
here we go again.
It's with us. So it came with us from. We thought we got rid of it by moving, but it didn't. It came with us.
Yeah, okay, so here we go again. So it wasn't the house, it was you, or it was your mother-in-law?
It was my mother-in-law. Now, by this time, my husband and I, were trying to talk, my mother-in-law, she was the one that was against telling anybody what was going on or trying to find somebody to help us. Because she said people will think we're crazy, or she had it in her head, if things like this happen to us, we must be evil and we're getting punished for something. We couldn't make her understand, this is something's happening, we need help. So from this point on, we started to look for help, but we became isolated. And then then the entity started to isolate us even more. He would go where we went, and he would make it so uncomfortable where we went, we would stop going places. Like we couldn't invite someone to the house, so we would go to visit them at their house.
Yes.
But the entity would do something, like we went to this gentleman's house. It was a friend of my husband and my mother-in-law's. And when we came home, on our kitchen table was the gentleman's wallet. Now, we were just at his house.
Gosh.
How can we explain to this gentleman why we have his wallet?
Very carefully.
So it did things like that to make us so uncomfortable that we kind of isolated ourselves from everyone. And by this time, we finally got my mother-in-law to try to allow us to go and try to find help to tell people what was going on.
What kind of help?
First of all, we went to a psychologist right here in Rancho Cucamonga, because I remember my mother-in-law was contacting the church at the time to try to get a priest to come to the house, and we decided to go to a psychologist.
Okay.
So we went to the psychologist, explained the whole situation. He was dubious at first. The more we explained to him, the more he started to believe. Finally, he said, I can't help you. He said, you need to go to a parapsychologist, or you need to get in touch with a church or some kind of institution that studies this kind of things. I can't do anything to help you. My mother-in-law contacted the local church. The priest agreed to come to the house. He came to the house. It was an older gentleman. He walked in the house. He walked into the foyer, and he wouldn't move from there. He was supposed to go through the whole house and bless the house. He said, no, I don't have to. I can do it here. He took out his holy water and he made the sign of the cross in the hallway. And he said, okay, it's blessed. And my mother-in-law said, aren't you supposed to go to every room and do this? He said, no, this is good enough. I have to leave. Huh. So then my mother-in-law decided she would try to explain to him what was going on. And he didn't want to hear it. He looked at me and said, ladies, when they get this age, they get a little crazy. I got to get out of here. And he just ran out of the house and jumped into his car.
Uh-huh. So the way you're telling the story, it sounds like he felt whatever it was, either was lazy or felt whatever it was and said, I'm out of here.
That's what I think it was, because he looked frightened.
Now, at this point, I'm sure you're hoping that did the trick anyway.
I was very doubtful that just that was going to affect this. But my mother-in-law was crushed because she thought the church would help her. So this really was a blow to her. From about this time, the entity started to focus all its negativity towards my mother-in-law.
Right.
Now, it made my mother-in-law's life hell. It destroyed her clothing. It would take one shoe, so she'd have a pair of shoes, but they'd be from different pairs of shoes. It would take her money, her wallet. It would destroy her credit cards, her license. She couldn't own anything. She couldn't have anything on her. Her purse, it would hide. Her glasses, she had a very bad eyesight. It would take her glasses, so she was constantly having to buy new glasses.
All right, I don't mean to be insensitive, but I've got to ask this. You remember what the priest said, right? Sometimes older ladies, particularly if they're scared or just because they're older, I mean, we all begin to change, right? So are you confident that the mother-in-law was of sane mind and...
Yes.
Other than being scared, I get that, and who wouldn't be?
My mother-in-law was an old world Italian lady, as smart as they come.
Okay.
And she was just frightened, but she was sane.
Okay.
And, I mean, I would see she'd go to her purse to try to get something, and she'd pull out money, it'd be all cut to pieces. Or she'd pull out her credit card, and it'd be sliced in pieces. So it just tormented her. In the new house, it was quite large. She had a bedroom upstairs with my father-in-law, and it had its own bathroom and a sitting room upstairs. We had a master bedroom downstairs, which was a little bit further away from them.
Okay.
And another thing it liked to do was knives. It would bring knives. Now, these knives weren't our knives. I don't know where the knives came from. He just imported them. He would stick them through the bottom of chairs. It would be the chair that she would sit in, so that if she sat, she'd sit on a knife.
So it would, it would be. I get messages. If that started to happen to me, I don't know. I'd question my wife and my daughter. But if I realized that this was happening, from something like this, I don't know what I'd. Well, actually, I don't know what you can do. You apparently can't move because it follows you.
Right.
You can't stop it because it's not human.
Right. We can't even see it to defend yourself. What do you do?
Yeah.
But the next thing to me was amazing. It started to write on the mirror with soap.
Okay.
And it was
What did
upstairs in her bedroom. In the bathroom of her bedroom.
What is the first thing you saw?
The first thing it said was, I think it was, talk to me.
Really?
Yes. And then I remember my father-in-law, when it first happened, she was upstairs alone. So, when she called me up, she said, you have to see this. I left the room, I came back in, and this was on the mirror. Everyone else was downstairs, so it just was her upstairs. So when we all came upstairs to look at it, to see what was going on, immediately the first thing you think of is one of us wrote it.
Sure.
Because I've never even heard of ghosts or demons writing on things and actually communicating with you. I never heard of that.
Well, it was in her room, so you would think she wrote it, right?
Right. So what we did first, we examined it, and I found out that it was soap. And so we cleaned it. We cleaned the mirror.
Right.
And we walked outside the bathroom. We were the only people in the house. There's only one door to the bathroom. The four of us stood outside the door. And I remember we talked. We said, if we go back in and there's writing, then we know none of us are doing this. We opened the door. We went back in.
Right.
And there was writing on the mirror.
Oh, my God.
So we knew then no one else could be in the little bathroom. No one else could get in the bathroom. We were in front of the door. And the four of us were right together.
Perfect.
So we knew
all right. So,
something was happening.
All right. So this time, what did it say?
It started saying it didn't want us to go in the attic.
Don't go in the attic.
Right. It didn't want us to go into the attic. It started to pretend. Now, when it wrote, it would write all the time. It pretended to be my mother-in-law's dead sister. My mother-in-law had a nickname when she was a child that only her one sister called her.
Yes.
It was Nini.
Right.
And the entity wrote on the mirror, Nini, don't go near the attic.
Sound advice, in my opinion.
So it didn't want us in the attic. It would say things, there's a bad wire, there's going to be a fire, stay away from it. It wasn't saying to us, if it was her sister, have someone check out your attic, there's a bad wire in it, I don't want you guys to get hurt. It was saying us stay out of the attic. So it didn't want us in the attic.
Well, I'm impressed that there were four of you who, after immediately cleaning this mirror, went back in and then saw it. Okay, so that eliminates any other possibility.
It did. At that point, we knew it wasn't one of us, and no one else could get in there.
All right, so usually, when there's a button and it says, don't press this button, everybody does. They press the button. So it didn't want you to go in the attic. And oh, my God, there's a mouse crawling across my table. I'm serious. Excuse me for a moment.
Okay.
I'm going to see if I can. My God, what is a mouse doing here? I wonder if it's your influence. I'm going to see if I can get a picture of this. Hold on. What in the world is a mouse doing in my studio?
It's funny because we were infested by rats for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Hold tight. Oh, now he's gone. Darn it. All right, where'd you go? I was just set to take a pee. He was just sitting right there. I'm sorry, Debbie. I'm really sorry. You're in the middle of this story, and I'm talking about a mouse. Where did he go? Okay, let's continue with the story, Debbie. I'll keep an eye out for the little guy.
Okay.
I hope it has nothing to do with your story.
I hope so.
Please continue.
So my father-in-law, we stood there. My father-in-law one time asked it what its name was.
Yes.
And it wrote Prince. It wanted to be called Prince.
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 Okay. At this point, apparently, he was, I don't know, getting used to this to the point he could do something like that, ask a question.
At this point, yeah, other than that, the time when it answered that, for the first, year, it didn't communicate with us. More so, it spoke at us. It wouldn't respond to what we were asking it. It would tell us things it wanted us to do, things we weren't supposed to do.
Was it like bad things it was telling you? I mean, give me an idea.
It was bad things, but it would say, don't go in the attic, don't do this, don't bring anybody to the house. If my mother-in-law and father-in-law had to go somewhere, if they didn't ask the entity, say they were going to go, it would destroy the car so they couldn't go. It had such power. It stopped us from doing some of the things we wanted to do. It would break windshields, break headlights. It was the most. You can't believe the feeling of almost being held captive in your house.
This is very serious damage, for one thing.
It destroyed the house. The entity had a symbol. It was a triangle, and it had a tail coming out the bottom. And it carved this symbol in the walls. It burned them in the walls. It cut pieces, like 4 or 5 foot pieces of rug out in the symbol. It literally destroyed our house. Every day was putting our house back together.
That's incredible. I mean, how do you go on living with something like that? Now, I guess at this point you knew it was with you, not just the house, so it wouldn't make any difference to move.
It was with us. I mean, no matter we went, like I said, we'd go out to dinner, we'd come home, on the kitchen table would be the name tag from the lady that waited on us.
Well, that sure takes the fun out of a night out.
Yeah.
Okay, so there had no way to get rid of this thing. I mean, I would have tried another priest. I don't know.
We tried everything. We called Lloyd Arbach. He was in charge. He had a paranormal organization.
I know him. Yes.
Yeah, he sent Chris Chacon out, and I remember Chris Chacon came out, and he had. So at that time, I've never seen one before. One of those meters, EMF meters, or whatever it is.
Yes.
And he went through the house and he checked it with that and everything. And when he was done, he couldn't do anything. He said. I said, well, what is it? What's going on? And he said to me, very, very nice gentleman, he said, there's some things in this world you're never going to understand. And that was all they could do for us. We went to Thelma Moss. She sent out Carrie Gaynor because she wasn't doing it at the time. He came to try to help us. No one could get rid of it.
Okay. I'm lost. I mean, at this point, what does anybody do? Yeah. But obviously,
Lloyd Arbach, very nice man.
Nice.
He was, very nice man. I'm trying to think of we had, like I said, people from all over. We even wrote to people in different countries. In Brazil, there was a gentleman that worked with these things. We contacted him. He told us to contact the Warrens. But before we contacted the Warrens, we had other people come out. We had this is the time I saw it show itself, or at least use something to show itself. 2 shamans came out to the house. Very nice people. They came out. By this time, the entity had destroyed my mother-in-law's room upstairs to the extent, and it was felt so dangerous now. We all moved in together into the master suite downstairs. It got to the point where she'd be sitting in a chair. She'd turn next door, and next door would be a knife sticking right next to her in the wall.
Oh, my God.
And these weren't our knives. We ended up with a box of knives, a big box of knives that weren't our knives that we just threw away.
Really?
He just supported them here.
So you saved them?
We had them in a box, and we threw them away after about a year when the box got filled. We just threw them away.
You had a box full of knives.
Yeah, and they weren't our knives. And they were all kinds of knives, old knives, new knives. The last thing was, before the spear came, I'll talk to you about the spear, but before they came, the Indians came. The shamans came.
Indians,
yeah,
okay.
Shamans. Very nice people. They really tried to help us. There were 2 shamans came, a female and a male. And I went with him upstairs. Now, no one was upstairs. The entity took over the upstairs. It became his upstairs. Okay. You could feel it if you started going up the steps. You get halfway up the steps, and it was like something would just tell you no, and you want to come back down the steps. You just left it alone. So we didn't use the upstairs for like 6 years.
Good Lord.
He went. The 2 shamans went upstairs. They asked me to come with them. I went with them. They did a ritual. They had. I remember. Feathers, and they were putting sage, I think, all through the rooms and chanting. They opened up the door, which is right at the top of the steps that goes into the attic. They opened up the door, and they would blow the sage in. And as they would blow the sage in, a second later, something would blow it back out.
And so their reaction?
They said, we have to go into that room. Okay. So they went into the attic. I stood right at the doorway so I could be right there seeing what was going on. Now, the attic had a pink insulation around the walls. And he told me he was going to confront this and make it show itself. I stood right there and watched this happen, and it's something I'll remember to my dying day. As I watched, the pink installation came off the sides of the wall and formed into a gigantic head. It was like a 5-foot head hanging from a rafter. And it was just a head, that was all, and I only saw the side view of it. I didn't see the front. And it had a huge chin and a large nose, and on the side of its head, instead of an ear, it had a circular horn that started there and made a circle and went up and over the top of its head into a big horn.
How are you taking this, Debbie? Even the unaverage person could not take this kind of stuff happening. I've never had anything like this happen before. Now, I'm telling you, you heard me when it happened. I just took a picture and I sent it to Keith. Now, it's not of the mouse because the mouse is vanished, gone. Here's the way it came down. And it's just too weird. I mean, on my right, literally, on my right is a Denon CD player, right? And above that, I've got a special Denon machine that plays Keith's voice. I've got the evil Keith on my mind. Will play Ross's voice.
Feel free to.
Like that, when I hit a button. That's where the mouse was standing. Now, that's directly in front of me, right next to me. And this mouse is sitting there, eyes open, looking at me, curious or something. I mean, why would a mouse get that close to a human and then just sit there and stare? I turned to my left to get my camera, and, I started to open the camera app, and I turned back around and it was gone. That was freaky. Let me tell you, that was freaky. That mouse I'm going to name Abby. I need to do something with the name Abby. Oh, I wonder where it is. What was weird about it is, A, it was so close to me. B, it could have set off Ross's voice. It was just standing there. And C, it was staring at me. I'm telling you. I looked it right in the eyes. It looked at me. I know. Too much, right? But it happened, and I had to get that off my chest. All right. Gathering back together. It's just weird. It's weird that it happens when I'm getting a story like this from Debbie. Hey, Debbie.
Yes.
I mean, that's almost impossible. There's, a mouse. They're pretty,
timid.
The kind of, timid and scattered. This guy I could have grabbed him with my hand. That's how close he was, and just staring at me.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to your weirdness. So, this thing is ruining your life. It's ruining your house.
I believe that this entity, whatever it was, and I still to this day don't really know what it was, I don't think it had the power to actually kill her. I think it wanted her to commit suicide. And that was trying to drive her to suicide.
That's a very good point. A very good point. It seems like it was trying to either scare her to death, or, as you point out, have her take her own life.
Right. I was trying to protect her the best I could, but how can you fight at something you can't see? So I went into the mirror at this time. I was very angry with the entity. And I confronted it, and I told it, I said, listen, I'm going to treat you with respect. You'll treat me with respect. You're not to touch my child, my husband, or my mother-in-law, Lee. And I left the bathroom to see what it was going to say. A minute later, I walked back in, and it wrote on the mirror, I will not touch the child. I will not touch your husband, but Lee belongs to me. That's when it told me, when I asked it why, that's when it wrote the story of what happened in the past and why she belonged to him.
Well, wait a minute. It wrote the whole story?
Yes. It took an hour. I would go in, he'd write on the mirror, I'd erase it, I'd go back out, come back in. He told the whole story.
Oh, Debbie, I don't get how you held up through this, psychologically held up. How did you, not go bonkers?
Because I was so worried about everybody else and making sure they were safe and trying to appease the entity at the same time. Because I found out from that time on That's when I started calling the entity Mr. Entity. I wouldn't call it Prince because I wouldn't give it that power over me to call it Prince because that's what it wanted. So I couldn't call it Entity. So I just called it, I told it I'd treat it with respect. And it sounds silly, but I started calling it Mr. Entity. From that time on, I referred to him as Mr. Entity, and he would call me Debbie. And from that time on, instead of talking at us, he started to actually communicate with me. He would write to me on the mirror.
Did you get any photographs of all this?
This is funny. When it first started, we'd had one researcher come and he would say, now take pictures of everything that happens and document everything so that you can show the next researcher or you can show me what's happening.
Yes.
So we would. It'd write on the mirror, we write it in a book, and we try to take pictures. Now, some of the pictures aren't great because you have to remember back at that time, it wasn't the digital camera where you could see if you took a good picture.
Right.
And taking pictures of a mirror, you got a lot of glare.
Right. Right. I get that, but you did.
Okay.
You did take pictures.
During this whole 6-year period, we must have taken 1,000 pictures. My husband died, and I was cleaning out the closet, and I found the box in the back of the closet.
Right.
And I opened it up, and it was full of the pictures from the demon.
Oh, all right. Now, you indicate that something happened involving animals. What was that?
Oh, this is very sad for me to talk about because the entity killed our animals. It's so sad. It was just...
All right, you did contact Ed and Lorraine Warren, right?
Right. I contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren.
What did they do?
They were very nice people. They came out. This was back in, 88, I think, or was it 89? The beginning of 89. It was in February of 89, I think it was.
Right.
They were very nice people. I contacted them. They said they were coming out to California to have some kind of convention or something with a friend of theirs. I think his name was Chuck Moses from Los Angeles.
Okay.
And so they said they would stop and try and see if they could help us. Ed Warren was... you could sit and talk to him for hours. He was such a very kind, nice man. Lorraine was a little different. She's a little standoffish, a little reserved, but they were both very nice. I remember they came into the house. Now, whenever the entity did something, very few times did you actually ever get to see it. It's like you had to turn your back or blink an eye before it happened. And this is one of the things I actually saw. When Lorraine came into the room, she walked by a toy box, and the toy box slid right out in front of her.
Okay. So the Warrens tried, but no luck.
They came. We all sat down. She said, "I'm going to walk through the house." She walked through the house. She came back down. She was rather pale, and I remember she looked at us and said, This demon is the most powerful, ancient, evil demon I have ever experienced. She said, this is bad. I remember turning dead and saying, this is bad, Ed. This is really bad. Of course, my mother-in-law almost passed out when she heard this because it really scared her. They told us they didn't have any contacts in California, someone who could come and help us other than them.
Right.
And so they decided, Ed said he would do a rite of provocation.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
I really don't know either. It's just he kind of confronted the demon. But,
Okay.
At the time, I think there was more than one thing in the house. And at the time, we had a researcher staying with us whose name was Gary. And the entity just hated Gary. He would torment Gary as much as he tormented my mother-in-law.
This is a horror movie.
It is. It's like anything that ever... we had, I don't mention the things like the smells and the pounding and the banging because they seem so non-consequential compared to the other things that happen.
Right.
But we had all that. We had, for 2 weeks, we had, rats infesting... they were so bad that in the pantry, you'd open the door and they'd be hanging upside down, swinging in the pantry.
Really?
We had birds for over a week that would bombard our windows in the bedroom.
I wish you hadn't told the rat story. I'm still looking for that thing.
Rats.
Wonderful. Rats. Hanging upside down.
Hanging upside down, just swinging. And they wouldn't move. You'd go in and you'd look at them, and they'd just look at you. It was like they weren't afraid of you.
Now you're scaring me, Debbie, because you're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Now, you're serious. Are you really serious about the rats just staring at you?
I swear to you, they just would stare at you. They wouldn't run. They just look at you. And we'd have to back. I remember backing out of the pantry with Mom. We'd say, "Oh my God!" And then my father-in-law said, "Oh, don't worry." He said, "I'll go get rat poison." And Mr. Entity wrote on the mirror, "If you get rat poison, not only the rats will get the poison."
Oh my God!
See, this is what he did. He would threaten us, but then he would back up his threats. He wanted us to bring a gentleman here who had come to the house before, who he said he had known in a past life, and he said if we didn't bring him, something bad would happen. Well, we didn't want to bring this gentleman back to the house. It wasn't the type of person we wanted to bring back to the house.
Yeah.
So he killed another dog. So see, that's what he did. What could we do? How can you fight that? You can't fight something you can't see. There was no one to help us. It was just a matter of surviving. Our life became so bizarre. It was like what was abnormal to someone else would be normal to us. Getting up, looking for knives, pulling knives out of the wall. I mean, we got to the point where we would just do it. It's like it wouldn't frighten us anymore because it became so part of our life.
Well, now you're starting to scare me a little bit. Here I am listening to your story. I'm 70 years old, Debbie, 70. A mouse does not come up 2 feet away from you, and that's how close this mouse was. I took a photograph, by the way, and sent it to Keith. So if you want to see how close it is to me, it's the device that allows me to play Ross Mitchell. This mouse, if he had put his foot forward just a hair, would have set off one of those and played Ross Mitchell. Mm-hmm. That's how close it was. But what got to me was a little guy sat there and just stared at me. Right.
It's like they're not afraid of you. It's like they're almost just staring you down.
Well, yes, that's never happened in my 70 years, Debbie, and here you are telling this story tonight, and you get to rats staring at you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're freaking me out a little bit now. When we come back, I want to sort of finish up, and then I want to begin to take some calls. Would you mind doing that?
Oh, certainly. I'd enjoy it.
All right. What a night this has been. And if she had not come to the story on the rats, I would have been, Okay. I'm going to go to some calls. This story did a pretty good job on me tonight. Yeah, this whole night is strange. Let's go on to our next caller. You're on the air with Deborah. Hi.
Hey, how y'all doing? I just wanted to clarify with you, Debbie, there was no apparitions that have appeared during this situation?
My mother-in-law saw something twice. She saw blackness come after. It actually chased her down the hall. And she saw like a blackness. No, nothing with the eyes, no form, just black. It went after her twice when she was alone.
A shadow figure of some kind?
Actually, she said it wasn't even a figure. It was just blackness, like a black cloud.
You've written books. Do you think, Debbie, anybody biting on a movie?
You know what? I never even pursued that. My first goal was just being able to tell people what happened after so many years of hiding it. I just felt so good. Just telling people, look, this really happened. I mean, that was my first goal, just to get it out there, to let people know what happened, to be able to just tell people about it.
Yeah, I get it. That helps to be able to talk to people. There's no question about it.
It really did help.
All right. Let's go to Chase, I believe it is, on Skype. Hello.
Hello, how are you guys?
We're fine.
Good, thank you.
Great. Deborah, I wanted to ask you if you ever did any research on Prince, actually. I vaguely remember something about Solomon in the Old Testament working with some form of demon called Prince, or any kind of research on the triangle with the tail.
You know, we had Todd Hendrickson, who's a researcher right now, looking into it, and he hasn't found anything that matches it completely yet. He's still looking, he's still researching, but no one can come up with it. But you'll see, if you see some of the pictures in the book, I mean, he put the symbol everywhere. So it was his mark.
All right, thank you very much for the call, and take care. This is just an odd night all the way around. Let's go to Matt on Skype. You're on the air.
Great, entertaining show tonight. I just had a couple real quick questions, Deborah. Did anyone ever see the Mr. Entity doing his writings on the mirror?
No.
Or was
it never would write in front of you. You had to turn your back or leave the room for a minute and come back.
And I may have missed this earlier, but was there ever any smell? I don't know why through the whole show it just smelled like Old
like I
Spice
said
or
before,
something.
there were a lot of those things. We had the smelled like rotting food, rotting flesh, noises, poundings. I remember the night before the shamans came to the house, the whole night it pounded on the walls in the beat of like the war, boom, 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 boom. You know, and the entity, it knew the entities, the shamans were coming the next night, and it pounded like that the whole night before they came. So we had all that.
Oh, all right. Thanks a lot, Art.
You're welcome. You know, I can smell something odd now, too. I wasn't even going to mention that, but something smells a little different or weird in here. I think what it is I've been psychologically traumatized by Abby Normal and your story. God, this is a scary story. I just don't know how you made it through, but you had no choice again, so... Still, you kept a very level head. I mean, as I hear you talk about it now, it seems like you did keep a very level head. Hello, you're on the air.
Hey, Art, this is Josh from Dallas.
Hey, Josh.
At first, when I heard this, I sort of ran everything through my head, and I think the thing that really got me, I just went on your site, and I looked at the book and the symbol that is on the book. Now, was that the symbol that Deborah had been shown by this entity?
Yes, it's a triangle with a tail, and he put that all over. He even carved it into our car.
Aye.
Have you ever heard of an Iblis?
No.
That is the symbol of the Iblis jinn.
What is that?
That is, though it is spoke about in the Hadith. I saw that exact symbol whenever I was in Afghanistan in 2010.
Can you spell that for me?
Really?
Can you spell that, please?
IBLIS.
Okay.
It is the third type of jinn. That is why you saw smoke. That is why you had certain smells.
Now, does it like water? Because this one had a lot of control over water.
Yes, they are, I guess is the term people would know it as, they're elementals. You had the Iblis, the third kind, are rooted to one area but are capable of moving about. The other type, the second type, either takes the form of a dog or a snake. And because I was doing some quick research looking into that spear coming from the Congo, 200 years ago in the Congo, King Leopold II had taken over that area and was cutting off hands of people who were not weren't working fast enough. That place holds like $50-60 trillion worth of minerals.
All right, very quickly, in Islam, Iblis is a jinn who refused to bow for Adam. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, that is what this is.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very, very much for the call.
That's fascinating.
And I guess you're going to have to look it up, Deborah, and see if you can find the symbol.
Yeah, I will, because no one's ever been able to find that symbol.
Okay. Well, I'll be looking, too. That's pretty amazing. All right. Well, thank you so very, very much.